They gain relevance when you respond. So as you can see with these beautiful pictures that I've included in my most recent slideshows, where it's depicting a form of luxury. And a lot of the time, people only equate luxury to a physical item. But I want to utilize this analysis today to depict the fact that luxury extends even to your emotional and mental well-being. So furthermore, to elaborate, I want to talk about how your response is a luxury. And in particular, how certain people will perceive that, and what they will do is they will trick you out of operating in that state and stoop down to their level. So you have to understand that when it comes to someone who is trying to provoke you, they are essentially trying to ride off of your emotional coattails. So you have to be very careful before you just start. In the Bible, it refers to it as casting your pearls before swine. And what that means is giving your valuable time, giving your valuable contributions, giving your valuable assets to somebody who is going to squander it because they don't understand the value that comes with it. But nevertheless, you have to understand that when it comes to responding to something, there's also a reactive abuse pipeline attached to it. What I mean by that is someone who is trying to elicit a negative response out of you, they could care less about the conversation at hand. This is why, and feel free to put in the comment section if you've ever experienced this. This is why you can be in a full-blown argument with someone and you're presenting facts to them. You're telling them the truth, but they keep telling you bold-faced lies. And it's almost like the more and more confused that your face gets, like, you know that didn't happen. You know I didn't say that, or I know you didn't tell me that. It's almost like they have a smirk on their face. Why? It's because them engaging in this back and forth with you has less to do with them coming to a common agreement with you, or you guys getting to the bottom of the situation. You all coming to a conclusion that, you know what, this is how we're going to proceed moving forward in a productive and healthy manner. It has nothing to do with coming to a common agreement. Instead, it's about eliciting a negative reaction and response out of you because they're feeding off of your reaction. Now, another point that I want to highlight is the importance of emotional regulation. For those of you all who have frequented my channel since I started it, you guys are familiar with me reading from this excerpt in the book Green Eyes that talks about utilizing emotional regulation as a strategy when you're dealing with envious attacks. But this extends in all facets of life, right? Even though I specifically talk about envy a lot, there are some people who may just be they're big on chaos. You know, there are some people who are leaning towards peace in their life, but there are other people who feed off of chaos because they feel like it gives them a sense of control over other people's lives, over their relationships, over other people's narratives. So you can even be dealing with someone who is trying to elicit a negative response out of you because they have a desperate need for control, or they feed off of everyone operating in a state of confusion, right? So emotional regulation is just a valuable strategy to implement when you're communicating with someone who is clearly more interested in disagreeing with other people rather than coming to a common agreement. But nevertheless, another reason why implementing emotional regulation, but most importantly, being able to discern where emotional regulation is going to be your best bet when you're communicating with someone or when you have to deal with someone, is when that person is trying to get you to stoop to their level based off of public appearances. So there's another scripture that I'm thinking about as I'm talking about this, but just to paraphrase, it talks about how important it is to not argue with the fool. I believe this scripture is in the book of Proverbs. And the reason why that scripture says that is because people who are on the outside looking in won't be able to differentiate the fool from the person who has common sense, because that fool has successfully gotten you to partake in that foolish argument with them. So there are some situations where you have to perceive your response is too valuable, it's too luxurious to even partake in a back and forth conversation with this person who is clearly not on the same emotional and mental level that you're at. And it's not to necessarily act as if you have a chip on your shoulder, as much as it is about you understanding, I'm more interested in coming to a solution, or I'm interested in peace. I'm interested in coming to a common agreement, versus this person wants me to jump through hoops. They want me to lash out. They want me to act a fool. They want me to react in a negative manner because they are more interested in others perceiving me in a negative light because they have ignited a one-sided competition against me. So another thing that I want to mention is it's important to implement emotional regulation, because sometimes people are trying to provoke a reaction or a response out of you to get you to show your hand. And this is a very tricky situation because sometimes you don't perceive that you're on the horizon and this person is being booted out, however that may look, right? And what they'll try to do is gain intel about what you're up to, what your weaknesses are, what your shortcomings are. Now, mind you, we're all human. There's nothing wrong with you having these particular, assets or attributes. It's normal. It's a normal facet of life. However, when you're dealing with someone who is trying to weaponize certain things against you because they're trying to regain their footing at the expense of knocking you off of your A game, you have to be very mindful. And I'll never forget being in a particular circle, and they were so adamant about, well, you're presenting yourself in such a perfect manner. And I was like, I'm not presenting myself in a perfect manner. I don't understand what else you could want from me. But realistically, when you're dealing with people who, when you aren't jumping through hoops for them, or you're not telling them the ins and outs and every detail of what you're thinking, what you're going through, it makes a manipulative person uneasy. So someone who is trying to entail control and dominance over you, or they're trying to figure out what your shortcomings are, what your weaknesses are, what that thing is that makes you tick, because at some point they're going to try to weaponize that against you and exploit you. When you don't give them that advantage, it drives them crazy. So you have to be very, very particular about implementing emotional regulation, because you may be in a den of lions and you haven't perceived it yet. So you don't want to be frivolous when it comes to your reactions. You don't want to be frivolous when it comes to your next move. There's another thing that I want to bring up that talks about never let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, right? So it's also important to preserve your pearls. And that's another excerpt, ironically enough, in the book, In the Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power. But it's important to preserve your pearls rather than casting them before people who are going to squander them and trample over them. So we talk a lot about currency in a monetary sense, right? But I also want to highlight the fact that your attention and your energy is also a form of currency. Whatever you give attention to, whatever you give your energy to, you're going to keep receiving that back. And there's a scripture that I absolutely love to reference just to keep myself in check, in all honesty. But it's the scripture that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What does that mean? It means that realistically, whatever you constantly think about, your actions and your conduct will soon follow. So the power of the mind, the power of your attention, the power of your focus is something that needs not be taken lightly. But to elaborate a little bit more on some of the points that I've been making in this video thus far, I'm going to read from the Preserve Your Pearls excerpt in the book In the Lion's Den, Navigating Systems of Power. Preserve your pearls. Navigating systems of power requires you to protect your most valuable assets at all times. Those outside yourself are often only interested in using your talents for their gain, with no real intention of safeguarding them. In these systems, value is seen solely from a capitalistic perspective, meaning others seek ways to profit from what makes you exceptional. However, few will genuinely commit to assisting or protecting you. The sooner one understands that these systems are driven by opportunism, the sooner they can align with their goals. This realization is grounded in reality, making these goals more tangible. The biggest obstacle to many in navigating systems of power is their inability to accept the harsh truths embedded within them. So preserving your attention and your reaction as if they were pearls is a great way for you to start implementing emotional regulation, and also redirecting that attention and that energy to what is actually constructive in your life. You have to understand that when you choose to invest in feeding into a negative narrative that someone is trying to paint about you, that's energy and time taken away from things that you can be building to better your future. So in sum, always remember this: your energy, your time, your reaction, and your communication are all forms of currency. Make sure that this currency is well spent. All right, babes, that's all that I have for this analysis today. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. But of course, I want to hear you all's comments, opinions, perspectives, and personal experiences in the comment section below. I also wanted to let you guys know that I have recently launched my beauty channel and it is now live. The handle is Miss Read the Room 2. So you can subscribe over there if you're interested in watching makeup tutorials, skincare routines. So be sure to subscribe. I look forward to seeing you guys over on that channel as well. But I want to thank you all so much for watching this analysis today, and I look forward to speaking to you guys in the next one. Take care, babes.